The Owl Who Carried Dreams. Evening drifted across Wistmere in a hush that felt like warm water poured over stone, and the tower breathed its contentment while Elorin tidied the little study in the way that pleased both pages and shelves, setting the quill to rest, smoothing the soft nap of the blotter with 2 fingers, and closing the window with the same careful courtesy he used when opening it, so the room would never feel hurried by his hand. And as the last lines of pink faded from the river and the orchard settled into a mild whisper, he felt once more the afterglow of that mist-bridged morning when voices of the past had walked beside him step for step. And he smiled at the thought that the world was full of crossings no map could name. The cat with silver paws stretched herself into a long ribbon and arranged her tail in a neat curve across the windowsill, where she pretended to watch nothing in particular while in truth she watched the whole night with that precise calm only cats and old clocks possess. And when Elorin set a bowl of water upon the sill for the air to sip, the cat dipped a paw as if blessing the bowl on behalf of the moon. On the table near his elbow lay the little harp from beneath the floorboards, resting beneath its cloth the way a sleeping bird tucks its head beneath its wing. And the house itself seemed to hum with a low contentment made of the harp's remembered tones and the last threads of afternoon work. The flick of a broom, the bell of a spoon touching the rim of a cup, the hush of an open page. Elorin's hair gathered the window's pale light and offered it back as a soft silver, and his eyes, that bright star-flecked blue, held the day's warmth like bowls hold milk, and he was thinking that he might play a single line for the tower before bed when a whiteness came soundlessly across the river, not the white of cloud shreds or the white of mist, but the white of living feather, honest and soft, and it crossed the orchard with unhurried wing beats that moved the air with a steady rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. The cat stood at once and made a dignified small sound that meant visitor, and Elorin leaned into the window's darkening pane and saw the owl as it came to stand upon the sill, wide-eyed and calm, a bird as pale as a folded sheet left to cool, with delicate freckles upon its rounded face and a faint dusting of sparkle at the tips of its flight feathers as if it had flown through a place where stars had been ground to powder. Elorin greeted the owl as he would greet a traveler, with a quiet voice and an open palm, and this courtesy seemed to please the bird, for it dipped its head with serenity and arranged its feet so lightly on the wood that the old grain whispered a friendly welcome. For a time they looked at one another, and the study filled with that affectionate silence that falls when beings who are not related by kin decide that kinship is a matter of choice. And Elorin felt in the owl a quality he loved in Master Aldrin, the kind of patience that can hold a room together simply by being present. When the bird moved, it did so without hurry, opening one wing and then the other until the room smelled faintly of clean down and cold air, and in the lift and fall of each feather there drifted a fine dust that glimmered like frost caught in lamplight and then faded before it reached the floor. And Elorin drew a breath as if to hold the dust in his chest for an extra moment so that it could settle there like a blessing. The owl made a sound that was not quite a hoot and not quite a sigh, a sound with the roundness of wool, and from the edge of its wing it released a small curl of that sparkling powder that hung between them and began to turn like a slow galaxy. And in its turning there appeared a picture so gentle he nearly missed it. A little curve of shoreline he had never seen, sand pale as flour and a line of water polishing the edge again and again, and at the boundary of shore and sea stood a hut, with a roof made from curved leaves. And within that hut a child slept with one hand open across the coverlet as if his dream wished a place to sit. The picture trembled and shifted like a thought remembered, and a new scene formed within the powder's slow spin. A courtyard he did not know, where laundry lines wore bright cloths that moved with the manners of flags, and a garden well held the sky in its round eye. And beside the well sat a woman who had tilted her face to listen to a song perhaps sung by that country's night, her hands stilled upon a bowl. The scenes dissolved and returned with the gravity of breath, and Elorin felt the shape of the owl's offer without needing words. For the dust was not only showing him places, it was showing him the paths between people when they sleep, the tender roads built each night by minds and hearts that touch without traveling. And the owl's eyes said, "Come and see how they are linked by rest." And Elorin's heart answered before his mouth could, "Yes, teach me." He turned to glance at the harp as one looks back to a friend before stepping through a doorway, and he touched its string with 2 fingers so that a soft line rose into the room like a ribbon winding upward. And then he reached out his hand to the owl, and the bird stepped from wood to skin as if to say that the boundary between wild and tame is also a bridge when crossed with kindness. The cat watched this with a composure that suggested she had expected it all along and perhaps had arranged it in advance. And she curled into a circle that spoke of approval, her silver paws tucked like moons beneath her chest. The owl raised its wings, and a few more grains of that sparkling dust lifted and spilled over Elorin's hands so that his palms glimmered faintly, and the bird gave one easy push upon the air, and the room thinned as a veil thins under fingers, and that soft, slow galaxy of dust parted to become a wide, clear avenue of night along which they moved. Not upward exactly, not outward exactly, but along a quiet seam where the world is stitched to itself. Elorin did not feel wind or cold in this movement. He felt a steady calm as if being carried across a lake that has decided to become glass. And the owl's back was warm beneath his fingers where they rested near the shoulder feathers. And the boy noticed that the glitter at the edges was not only lovely, it was purposeful, like flour upon a baker's board, a dust that keeps shapes from sticking where they ought to pass. The first place they visited was a cottage near a sloping field where sheep had made short phrases in the grass, and from the house rose the fragrance of rosemary and iron. And within a small bedroom a woman sat with a basket of mending upon her lap, though her head had dropped and her fingers rested among the folded cloth so that she dozed without putting the basket away. And beside the bed a baby slept in a carved cradle while a toy boat made from a scrap of wood leaned against the wall. The owl's dust sifted as fine as breath, and the air above the cradle brightened. And in that brightness Elorin saw the baby's dream begin. Not a story of old fear or sharp confusion, not a tangle that steals breath, but a simple voyage along a creek toward a sun that favored soft light. And he felt that this dream would carry the child through the night like a palm carries water. They did not land, they did not need to, for the dust was a way of seeing without asking anyone to wake or share. And the owl moved on with the steady purpose of a tutor who knows which pages are ready to be read. They came to a house within a walled town where the night wore a different perfume. The smell of figs and cooled stone and bread hung beneath a cloth to keep it tender. And there in a courtyard a boy a few years older than Elorin lay on his back upon a woven rug, his head pillowed on a heap of folded clothing that smelled of his mother's hands. And he had fallen asleep in the act of counting stars, one arm lifted, finger still pointing, the numbers written across his palm in charcoal so that his counting would never feel lost, and the dust that shed from the owl's wings settled upon the boy's finger and turned it into a small pointer of light. And in his dream he walked from star to star without falling, speaking the names he had given each one aloud so that in the morning they would be his across the hush of day. The owl carried Elorin toward a coast where the sea wore silver scars from milky moon paths and the tide spoke in the tongue of water upon stone. And there at a small harbor no larger than a market square slept an old fisherman in his boat, chin upon chest, hands loose, and at his feet the net breathed up and down like a sleeping animal. And the dust made from dreams settled across the net, and from each knot rose a picture of the man's past patient days, each knot a fish released or shared or cooked without greed. And Elorin learned that sometimes a dream is not what will be but what has been, held up to soften the heart until morning. They drifted inland to a place of many trees where snow had gathered itself in careful folds. And there a girl in a stone house dreamed of summer grass as if the winter night had given her a green blanket. And the owl's feather powder laid itself along the edges of her blanket as if to stitch the dream to the cloth so she would not lose it when she turned. And Elorin felt the sweetness of this and let it find its way into his chest. They moved again through the seam of the world and passed above a market town where the night men whispered as they stacked crates for morning. And they flew over a small circle of tents pitched around a traveling oven where a baker dozed with flour upon his cheek, and over a monastery garden where someone had fallen asleep sitting up with a book open on a knee. And above all these places the dust fell softly, and in each it linked sleepers to those they loved in other rooms or other cities. The dust drawing a fine unbreakable thread from breathing person to breathing person, and Elorin saw the web at last, how dreams lay a net that catches no creature but instead catches forgetfulness, so that people might wake and know again that they are held. Somewhere in the drifting he noticed a path that did not cross earth at all but crossed the sky as a line of wishful light. And along this line dreams traveled between those who had never met but were made kin by song. A woman in one country who sang quietly as she tidied her table, and a boy in another country who slept with a wooden flute beneath his pillow. And Elorin understood that the owl's dust did more than soothe. It also introduced and remembered. It led this breath to that breath, until the world could recognize itself as one breathing. The owl tipped a wing and they came low over a river that was not his river and yet felt related. A sister water with a different set of stones and a different chorus of frogs. And along its bank an elder sat on a bench with a shawl around shoulders too frail to bear cold, eyes closed, not asleep yet not awake. And above that head the dust arranged itself into a small window where the elder saw a long ago morning with a blue bowl of cherries and a certain laugh that only one person had. And that laugh returned to the elder as real as the weight of the shawl. And Elorin felt a warm ache and did not wish to fly on. But the owl made the smallest sound that meant the gift has been offered, and they moved gently away. They crossed a town where many lights still burned within small rooms and passed a school where the night gathered its quiet around the desks. And they rose over hills where lambs slept with their noses tucked into their own wool and where foxes wrote careful sentences along the edge of the hedge. And always the dust linked this sleeper to that, just as the mist bridge had linked past steps to present steps. And Elorin felt a round wisdom forming within him, the understanding that the world keeps itself whole during sleep and daybreak as faithfully as it does at noon, and that there is a music to this keeping which any heart may learn if it sits still enough near a window while night breathes. They came at last to a coast of tall black cliffs where the sea sounded like drums beneath velvet. And above the cliff stood a lighthouse that threw its patient beam across the waves as if combing them. And inside the tower a keeper dozed over a chart marked with fine lines. And the owl placed one grain of dust upon the chart so that in the keeper's dream every ship lit its own small lamp in answer, though perhaps no ship was near. And the keeper woke with a peace that would not leave him. For many days, Elorin felt gratitude swell in him for a bird that worked so tenderly without asking to be thanked. And he also felt a wish as round and innocent as the wish to give bread to a hand that has given bread to others. And he whispered to the owl a request that he did not want to be heavy. He asked whether he might give something back, whether there was a place where his small hands might lay a gift as one lays daisies upon a step for a friend to find later. The owl turned its head with that deliberate grace that makes birds seem like moving statues, and it lifted slightly so that the dust swirled and filled the air beside them with a new picture. A long table where scribes in some far place were copying songs by candlelight for children they would never meet, and the vision changed to show a girl in a house he did not know who slept with a piece of chalk under her pillow because in the morning she meant to write a welcome upon the door for her brother who would return at noon. And the vision changed again to show a man who guided his horse over a dark pass and whispered pleasant things to the animal to keep both of them brave in the gentlest way possible. And Elorin understood. Sometimes the gift is simply to see and to love in seeing. And he placed his palm upon the owl's back with reverence and said in the smallest voice, "Then teach me to see better." The owl banked again and the world rolled beneath them like a slow water wheel. And Elorin felt that the dust, which he had first imagined to be a kind of glitter sifted from the bird, was in truth made from the edges of dreams themselves. A soft tracery that fell away where dreams touched waking and which the owl gathered and returned to where it would do kindness next. And he realized with a quiet awe that kindness circulates like rain and river and cloud, and that this circulation needs very little instruction beyond attention. They came back across fields that slept like old dogs and over a village where the baker had already stirred embers to life, and into the orchard where the leaves made their gentle arithmetic of night, subtracting heat and adding cool. And they reached the window of the study in Wistmere Tower where the bowls still held a little of the room's breath, and the cat waited with dignity, though her tail betrayed her pleasure by drawing a slow curve on the sill, and the owl returned to that simple wooden perch as easily as if it had not flown at all. Elorin did not speak first. And when he did not try to tell everything for fear he would break it. He only said thank you in a voice that had found the paces of the night. And the owl bowed and shook its feathers once so that the last of the dust fell and then vanished. He set the harp upon his knee and let the instrument find a tune of 4 notes, then a 5th, then silence. Then those 4 again, and he thought of rooms far away where the dust had settled, rooms where his small melody might be felt without being heard. And he became careful with his fingers the way one becomes careful when carrying soup for a sick friend. And he played nothing clever, he played something shaped like sleep, and the tower liked it and kept a serving of the tune 4. Later, the owl's gaze stayed upon him, and within that bright round regard he felt a question, whether he would continue the work of seeing when the bird was gone, and he promised with all the seriousness a 12-year-old boy can possess, a seriousness made light by joy rather than burdened by duty. And he promised not only in words but with the manner in which he set the harp down, as if the instrument were an elder to be tucked beneath a soft cover. He fetched a pinch of rosemary and tucked it near the window latch so the night would have a small bite of garden on its tongue. He poured a little water into the bowl for the dark to drink. He folded the cloth upon the harp without noise. He arranged his bed so that the blanket lay without wrinkles, because a smoothness on top becomes a calmness inside. And he sat for a last moment with the owl and the cat, 3 creatures leaning into the same pool of air. Then he rose and the owl rose with him, not to leave, not yet, but to walk with him to the small alcove where he slept. And there the bird hopped to the footboard and watched while Elorin eased beneath the coverlet. And when the boy lay on his side facing the stone that had always been a quiet friend, the owl shook its feathers once more, and a few last grains of dust fell like tiny asteroids entering a warm, calm atmosphere. And one landed on his wrist where he felt the softest tickle, and then a coolness that went away and left behind a promise that tomorrow he would remember how these threats felt. He thought of the child by the sea and the boy in the courtyard and the fisherman in his boat and the elder with the shawl and the keeper of the light. And he thought of those farther places whose names he did not know yet, whose breaths now felt familiar. And he told his thoughts to breathe more slowly so they would not crowd the doorway of sleep. And he let each thought become a small image, and each small image float outward like a paper boat set upon a pond. And he did not chase any boat. He watched them as one watches stars, softly and with delight, until they drifted out of sight of themselves. The owl lifted at last and crossed the room to the windowsill and stood there with the river reflecting the moon behind it. And the cat joined and pressed her shoulder to the owl as if friendship were not a puzzle but an ordinary thing. And the two of them kept the easy watch that kind guardians keep, not stern at all, but present in the way of a clear night. Elorin would practice the art the owl had shown him. The art of seeing how dreams link each life to each life like beads upon the same soft thread. And he would learn to carry that thread gently even when his hands were busy with brooms or cups or quills. And he would remember that people far away whom he might never meet were already known to him in the best way, known by the quiet their sleeping gave to the night, and by the dust that fell when their dreams let go of their edges and went on as kindness into other rooms. For now he let sleep finish its welcome and held nothing tight and allowed every soft thing to meet every other soft thing without argument. And in that meeting the whole tower and the river and the orchard and the road and the unseen cities and the sea cliffs and the keeper of the light and the child who counted stars and the girl who slept with summer grass under her winter blanket and the old fisherman whose net rose and fell and the woman with her basket and the baker with flour on his cheek and the man who whispered pleasant things to his horse all breathed together as if they were the lungs of one great friendly body. And the owl tucked its face into the hollow of its wing, and the cat tucked her nose under her tail, and the world turned its page softly and began the next chapter in the same key.